This video is brought to you by the Logitech Lightspeed Wireless range of keyboards, mice and headsets, the benchmark in wireless gaming performance. Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new format, a weekly Digital Foundry Direct, where we're going to be talking about the week's news, the projects that we're working on, and we're also going to be fielding a bunch of questions from our Patreon supporters on the Digital Foundry supporter program. So yeah, something we hope to be running each and every week on Monday, something for you to look forward to, and maybe, just maybe, our Patreon supporters will get to see this show a couple of days early. But I'm not alone here. Joining me, first of all, from Frankfurt, John Linneman.
Hey Rich, how's it going? I'm kind of excited to do this. We've been wanting to do kind of a weekly podcast style show, if you will, just a discussion to kind of catch up on the news that we might have missed this week, other things that we maybe haven't done a video on, as well as just updates on what we've been working on and all that kind of stuff, plus the questions, of course. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, exactly. And also joining us from Berlin, a rather splendid looking Alex Battaglia.
Hello, Rich. Hello, John. Yeah, thanks. I'm really happy to be here. And I'm also really happy that we can finally get to do this. Like John said, we've been looking to do it for a while, and now we finally have the resources.
Excellent stuff. Well, let's kick off. Let's start by taking a look at what I think is probably the biggest story of the week, and that is the reveal, unconfirmed so far, of course, but I do think it's a bit of a done deal at this point, of a new Switch in the offing. Many people are referring to it as the Switch Pro, but it is a new Switch. It is using a 720p, apparently an OLED screen. I'm curious about this. What do you reckon, John?
So, yeah, this is an interesting proposition. To me, it sounds like it's just going to be kind of a refresh of the system. Some slight changes made, but we don't have any indication about what's changed internally. But I do think the screen thing is an interesting point to discuss, because I've seen a lot of people saying, it's still 720p? How can that be? But I actually think that's a smart choice in this case, because first of all, at that size, at 7-inch, 720p, it still has a solid pixel per inch kind of rating, I guess you could say. So it still appears very sharp. But already on the current Switch, we have I'd say at least half, maybe more, games don't actually hit native 720p when in portable mode as is, which means you're scaling up. So if they had gone for a 1080p screen, I think everything would pretty much be scaled in portable mode, which is really bad. You don't want, like, a lower resolution screen combined with native pixel res is always going to look better than a higher resolution screen where you're scaling up. So I don't think we would have seen enough or many games actually hitting 1080p in portable mode at all. So you just wind up with everything scaled. And I don't think that's a wise choice. Plus, lower resolution screen, and plus OLED actually, it saves on energy. So that means improved battery life. And, just OLED in general, I think is a big jump if that's indeed the case, because as you know, the Vita was renowned for this, but that was a very basic, I don't want to say subpar, but it wasn't an amazing OLED screen. The black levels were not perfect as they are on OLED TVs and more modern phones, and there were some other issues with it. I think modern OLED technology is so much better that this will just look phenomenal in comparison, especially when you consider that the current Switch, if you just look at the screen in the light, even with nothing on it, the material it's made out of gives it this gray look that I don't think is that attractive. So this will help a lot with contrast.
Well, I think from my perspective, I think people might be getting the wrong idea. I do agree with you. I do think it is going to be a refresh model, similar to the later 3DSs that came with larger screens. That's kind of how I see that fitting into the family. What we do have, information on new Switch models that has always proven reliable, has come from the team that reverse engineer the firmware and produced the Atmosphere OS, which kind of opens up the system. They have actually looked into the firmware, and since I think version 10.0, there have been references to a new Switch retail unit, and they have the full technical specification, again unconfirmed, but it is the same Tegra X1 that's in the current models, which I believe is a 16 nanometer version of the original chip. And they're saying it's got 4 gigs of RAM, exactly like the current model, but it does have a new display controller. There may well be facilities for upscaling to 4K, but I suspect it would be a basic upscale just so it works properly on 4K screens. Beyond that, there's nothing. So, if we look at that Tegra X1, we've got a bit of extra GPU headroom. They could increase CPU clocks if they wanted, but I don't think they're going to. I just think it would cause head problems for developers.
You kind of brought this up yesterday, is that I don't think right now Nintendo could afford to do a die shrink down to like 7 nanometer with a new chip, because like you say, there's just no space on the fab lines right now. Nobody can get these chips made. So I don't think Nintendo wants to produce a new device that's going to be that hard to manufacture that they couldn't get them out. Where if they stick with the current chip and the current process, it's a lot more feasible for them to be able to make as many as they need. So I think that makes sense from a manufacturing standpoint as well.
So I think no Switch Pro, as many people would want it, with new silicon. There's obviously been a lot of discussion about DLSS upscaling. And, some people saying, hey, well, they can just slap on a DLSS chip to the current design. What do you make of that, Alex?
So yeah, I've also heard a bit about this DLSS on the new Switch and people kind of wondering about it. The first thing I want to talk about regarding that is essentially that DLSS is not a hardware technique where you can just plug any game into it and take advantage of DLSS. It requires engine software specific programming for each individual game that'll be different, that requires to be hooked up for DLSS to work. So you can't just, for example, have DLSS apply to all games regardless of what's happening because there's hardware there. The second thing I want to say is that it obviously then can't enhance older games. For example, a new Switch with DLSS capabilities wouldn't all of a sudden have older games being able to use DLSS. They would require patches and compatibility patches, essentially, for that kind of thing to work. The third thing I want to mention then, I guess, is that the way DLSS is done, it's running on the NVIDIA's Tensor cores, and those cannot be really off-chip in a way. I'm pretty sure they use a lot of the same caches and stuff as a part of the rest of the SM unit, with like the shader core and the RT cores in it as well. So there's no really, I think, chance of a separate docking unit where you'd plug in the Switch to that, and then the docking unit separately would have hardware capabilities to then start allowing it to machine learned upscale outward. I think it is required to be part of the GPU for that to work.
I kind of feel like the only way to do a dock that really enhances the system would be to essentially have a completely separate GPU or SoC in the dock. And then the Switch hardware itself, like the portable unit, is not doing the processing. It just becomes like a link, basically. Like you connect it and it like shares some data, but all the processing happens on the dock side. Like that is feasible, but I'm positive that's not what we're talking about here. So I just don't, I'm really unsure how this would work.
Well, something that I picked up on in your Doom Switch interview with id Software and Panic Button, John, is basically that Panic Button seemed not keen on the idea of porting next-gen PlayStation and Xbox titles to the current Switch. They thought it was possibly a step too far. But I do think that if we move on to a new NVIDIA SoC, if it is based on a modern architecture, if the CPU is significantly beefed up, if we do have AI features that possibly won't even be in the current generation of consoles, it could be a really nice machine. But I think a lot of what people want are kind of big ideas and big technological statements that are best reserved for a Switch 2 as opposed to an enhanced version of the current offering. That's kind of my final thoughts on the topic, really.
Recently, we saw an announcement, I guess it was a week or two ago, where Sony basically revealed that they're doing the next generation PSVR.
Right.
And I kind of wanted to, touch on that because I think this is something we've all kind of expected would happen. And for me, it's really interesting because PSVR, it's getting up there in age at this point, right? So I think it was from 2016, if I recall.
Yeah,
So
it was the same year as PS4 Pro. It was remarkable.
Yeah,
they launched
right.
both simultaneously.
Exactly. So obviously, VR technology has continued to improve significantly in time, but so there's a lot of potential here. Now, for a while, I had always kind of thought like, oh yeah, maybe they're going to do like a wireless headset kind of design. But they revealed that it's going to be a single wire, which also makes it seem like it's just going to connect directly to the PS5 as opposed to requiring an additional box, which definitely makes sense if you're engineering a new console, just to feature that straight up.
Yeah, there's been some reverse engineering of the PCB of the PS5, and it looks as though the USB-C port on the front supports displays, which kind of makes sense.
There you go. So that would exactly. So I'm sure it's just a USB-C cable. Though to be honest, it's a pretty small port, and I hope it doesn't, have issues when under load, if you know what I mean. Because, well, I guess we'll have to see how they design that cable.
It would basically just be like the USB virtual link on the Turing GPUs and the new Radeons.
Yeah, it would be that. It's just that the main issue there is like when you're in VR, you're putting weight on that cable because you're moving
Right.
around. You know what I mean. So
It's
it's
a
like
physical thing then, yeah.
It's a physical thing that I'd be worried about. But I assume that they're taking that into account with the design. But then also, I'm really excited about potential for increased FOV, higher resolution screens. And then we've also seen some of those patents for the new controllers, which seem to resemble, the Valve Index hand controllers, or the Knuckles as they call it, I believe. So that actually is the game changer for PSVR users, because if you've only used VR on PS4 or with PSVR, then you're kind of missing like half of what the experience brings, which is there is the tracking system. I assume that with the way PSVR 2 will work, they'll probably attempt something like an inside-out tracking, similar to what Oculus is doing. That would make the most sense to me. But having really high-quality hand controls, plus better like room scale or tracking around the environment, that is so important to the PC VR experience, and it's something that just doesn't work well at all on PSVR. So I think that alone will be like a next-gen thing, and that's what would allow games like, not that it would necessarily be ported, of course, but like Half-Life Alyx, Boneworks, like those games just wouldn't work on a PSVR. Like, aside from the rendering tech, they wouldn't feel very good. I mean, it could technically work, but it would not be pleasant to play, I think, in comparison. So this is kind of exciting for me.
I just think on a technical level and on a concept level, I'm just really happy that Sony are doing another one. Because
exactly.
It's not entirely clear how successful the first one was for Sony from a kind of overall perspective. So it's really good to see them actually doubling down on it, because we've still seen nothing from it from Microsoft. And meanwhile, we've got stuff like the Oculus Quest 2, which I own, and I think it's just brilliant. But, the ability to have a mainstream console platform with a high-end VR solution is just excellent.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that I think will help keep VR alive. Just another platform, more accessible, hopefully well-priced. And hopefully by the time it launches, people will actually be able to get PlayStation 5s.
Yeah, there is that, of course. Yeah. Any thoughts on the new PSVR, Alex?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking, I'm not sure what it signals in terms of the software side, though, because it feels like it's been a while other than, I don't know, we haven't seen a lot of Sony first-party or third-party sponsored development PSVR titles in a while, as it kind of went under. And I kind of hope that when they bring out this PSVR 2 with PS5 support, that we see a new influx of kind of titles developed just for VR for it. I think that was a really strong initiative that they had when they brought out PSVR and brought out some really good titles that I tried out at John's house once. I found a couple of them really awesome. And I just hope that this new push in hardware of them supporting it also means a directed push from Sony in terms of software as well, too.
Well, speaking of software, we had some new PSVR stuff announced this week. And you seem quite excited about one title in particular, John.
Yeah, so they announced And this is interesting because it kind of felt like PSVR was end of life, but there's still stuff being announced for it. And they announced Doom 3 for the PSVR. And
Brilliant.
so this title has a lot of history with VR.
Yeah.
Because this was the title that John Carmack was messing with back when he was first made aware of the Oculus technology, working with Lucky and them. He showcased a prototype headset at E3 that year, and Doom 3 was the game that they used. And this was kind of like the beginning of the resurgence of modern VR. And then it was intended that when Doom 3 BFG would ship, it would have VR support. But then the whole Carmack, Oculus, ZeniMax thing kind of happened, and it just got real shaky, and that went away. And we kind of had to rely on like mods from the PC side to get it into the game. So now, though, I guess things have been worked out in an interesting way, and I don't know what it's like on the back end, but they've actually gone ahead and announced proper VR integration into Doom 3, and based on what you can see in the trailer, it seems to be significantly more advanced than what it was originally intended to be. Obviously, VR has changed. Like, it does seem to be using, I guess, the Move for hand controllers, because you could actually see them like hold up the wrist and look at like ammo counts and stuff on the glove. And I mean, technically the Move should work well enough for the kind of simple interactions of Doom 3. So it's not like Half-Life Alyx where you have all these granular motions. So I think it could actually work really well.
But no announcement of a PC version yet. But hopefully it will come.
Yeah, I'm imagining now that Microsoft has their say in all things ZeniMax, and I guess all things Doom as a result now, that there's probably less bad blood, John. Bad blood between those kind of parties that were involved back then in the whole John Carmack dispute. So I'd hope we'd see it on other PC VR platforms, and who knows, maybe Oculus as well.
Okay, so the next topic I think we need to discuss the reveal of the Radeon RX 6700 XT. Interesting this because, I don't know, it's not big Navi anymore, perhaps medium Navi.
Navi Light, I don't know.
Not quite as gigantic Navi, but interesting stuff that was in the reveal there, where they seem to be pitching it up against like 3060 Ti, 3070 even, which is really quite bold. Now, it's quite an interesting scenario here because it is a part that has 40 compute units. The 6800, I think, has 60. This is going to be $480. The 6800 notionally, of course, is $550, I believe. So, Alex, what do you think about this?
I think it's really hard to talk about these GPUs on just a technical level without discussing the market situation, which is, always on the back of, well, it's the most forefront thing. The price that they're putting this out for is not going to be the price that it's going to be available for in all likelihood for many users, especially depending upon the country you're in, with the kind of production and GPU wafer shortage that probably is also occurring on top of so many other things and the bots. So talking about the GPU right now for its price point is a little hard. I think it's priced okay at its MSRP. I think it could be better. I'm a little kind of like with the 3060. The RTX 3060, that is. I think it almost should be like a slightly cheaper card for some reason. Just looking at like where we are advancing over time in the GPU space, that this price point has been a certain level of performance for, in my opinion, maybe a little too long. But beyond that, I think the general specs that it have are really great for looking at comparing to next gen GPUs found in the consoles. It is more expensive by MSRP, but we're also looking at something that will have infinity cache, and it is targeting a 1440p kind of performance bracket, whereas consoles kind of always push for resolution a little bit more than 1440p. And I think actually in that like bracket where they're throwing it in with 1440p as the goal, I think this is pretty awesome actually. It'll probably be, when we get our hands on it, we'll see really good return at that resolution for price it's a whole other question. But I like the way the GPU looks, at least in their initial showing. The one thing that I was a little perturbed by, I guess, is where they showed like a spread of games, and they kept iterating the max settings mantra. Well, one, I don't think max settings are a great thing that we should be targeting for games, but I also am not sure if max settings were actually on in all of these examples, because they show things like, I don't know, like Cyberpunk was on there, and I guess they're assuming max settings before ray tracing is enabled for AMD GPUs, because I don't know if it would exactly be that exact same place next to its RTX companions. In the little chart
agree.
there.
If max settings isn't including ray tracing, it by definition it is not max settings. So that's a kind of difficult circle to square there. My perspective on the GPU seems to me that AMD have done a fantastic job of increasing clock speeds, RDNA 2, and we've already seen benefits of that on the consoles, specifically PS5, which is getting an awful lot of performance out of 36 compute units. It's really, really impressive stuff. And it seems to me that AMD now have actually taken the frequency advantage over NVIDIA. Their GPUs tend to be in the 1.9 gigahertz area, whether that's down to the fabrication node, whether it's down to the internal wiring on the GPU. Who knows? But that is a strong advantage that they have. But, if we consider medium Navi to be a slightly less performant version of the lower end big Navi, we should expect to see the ray tracing performance to scale in line. And I guess also they still have the fundamental issue of limited machine learning support. And as we saw recently with your Neo video, DLSS just seems to be able to do a phenomenal level of work in terms of making sure that the GPU doesn't need to spend all of its time painting pixels. I think that's a huge advantage. We still haven't seen AMD's solution to that. I was really hoping that we would see this temporal upscaling solution.
That was kind of the main thing I was thinking about. As you look at the price of this versus, say, like the 3060, and let's say for a moment that these cards are actually possible to purchase, because that's a whole different issue, I think. But I kind of feel like, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, but it still feels like the 3060 might have an advantage here if you factor in things like DLSS and support for ray tracing and machine learning capabilities and all of that. And really, when you look at the lower end big Navi versus this, I feel like the price, the price gap isn't as significant as I would expect, since you're cutting the VRAM down, you're getting down to 40 compute units. So, it looks like a great card on paper for sure, but the pricing is what seems a little bit weird to me. I don't know.
I think if you look at AMD's big success story, which is Ryzen, they are now proper competitors to Intel, to the point where in terms of mainstream desktop chips, they are way ahead. And if we look at how they got way ahead, a number of factors. First of all, the platform wasn't limited in the way Intel chips are, memory overclocking and whatnot. You could overclock any chip. You could have new features first, like PCI Express 4.0. You got more cores for your money. And that's kind of the story of Ryzen, really. It was properly disruptive. You had the technology, you had the cores, you had the price. The pricing was just super aggressive. And I guess that is the biggest challenge outstanding for Radeon in taking on NVIDIA, is that the competition isn't quite as relaxed as Intel got. And it's much more of a pitched battle. And the pricing says to me that they can't deliver a Ryzen moment in the GPU space, certainly not for now. But certainly there are a number of things that have been addressed. The performance differentials on rasterization are clearly much closer than they were previously. Obviously, AMD didn't have access to GDDR6X. They overcame that with the Infinity Cache. So there's a lot of really smart engineering happening with Radeon at the moment. I guess another thing which sort of concerns me a bit is if there is limited access to 7 nanometer wafers at TSMC, I suspect from a strategic perspective, it makes sense for AMD to use more of their available wafers for Ryzen than it does for Radeon, because they'd make more money from them.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, that sort of limits their kind of competitiveness on the GPU space. But in terms of the 6700 XT, really looking forward to trying it out. Really looking forward to seeing, how this smaller amount of compute units performs when given a really decent amount of GPU clock. And certainly the numbers that they came up with were punching above their weight, I think. But, they kind of always do. Then again, the numbers that they came up with for the 6800 XT, they all checked out. So I'm just really looking forward to getting the product in hand and seeing what it's capable of.
Yeah. One thing I want to say is, you did mention it, John, about the importance of, or even Richard, the importance of DLSS, and how it's a little weird how we haven't seen the AMD solution and competitor solution to this. At the announcement, they did show off a bit of footage of Resident Evil Village running on PC, using, I presume, DirectX ray traced reflections and whatever features were also found in the console version. Maybe there's more, hard to tell. But they also said plus fidelity effects as a part of that. And I wish they had just a little bit more specific nomenclature for their fidelity effects suite, because it has 8 or 9 different effects in it right now. And when they put that in there in the little announcement, I actually wasn't sure what it was referring to. So I would actually like to see some more clarity on their virtual super resolution, or whatever they're going to end up calling this thing. And just also to learn how it technically works, because they have it in a little corner in one of the graphs that they were showing off. And I would just like to learn more about it, because it's going to be a big deal in the next coming years, because ray tracing is expensive. Games are going to be targeting bigger GPUs and consoles eventually, maybe even 30 FPS there. So getting to your all-important 60 FPS on PC is going to be so much harder. Technology like that is really, really important.
I'm really excited to see it, but fundamentally, I think there was an interview with a German outlet where they ruled out that it would be using machine learning, in which case we've got a huge amount of temporal supersampling and upscaling technologies via various developers on the market right now. And to match DLSS is going to be really, really difficult. Personally, if I was AMD, I'd be straight on the phone to Insomniac to ask them how their temporal supersampling technology works, because I honestly think it's the best that I've seen.
Yeah, it's really good.
One last thing I wanted to get in is, we were mentioning earlier, John, you said the RTX 3060 is an interesting competitor because of these technological differences. But they also, the RTX 3060 has this weird, I would say, design where it has a lot of VRAM in a GPU that I'm not sure it's ever going to really need it, based upon its target compute level. I think we perhaps at some level at Digital Foundry should, in a video in the future, do a good investigative report into the actual necessary amount of VRAM required at games at certain resolutions before stuttering is induced. And not just the numbers reported, because we know those numbers are not always reliable, but it's a matter of okay, at what level of VRAM can we in FCAT actually start seeing degradations in performance? That's more important than saying this GPU uses 9 gigabytes or 10 gigabytes of VRAM. The
thing is, though, Alex, is, YouTube content creation is becoming bigger and bigger. We're doing it, but a lot of other people are doing it as well. And I think it's really, the more VRAM you can pack into a lower price product, the better for video production.
Yeah.
So while obviously games are the focus for these cards, I think today content creators also need to be taken into account for this kind of stuff. And if you have that extra bit of VRAM, helps so much when editing video, and Adobe software especially.
So much, yeah.
I think my final point on this, we've been talking about the 3060. This is basically, notionally a $330 part. This is a $480 part. So I think that AMD think they have a good chance against the 3070 with this one. a bit cheaper, so possibly not quite as performant overall. That's kind of how things worked out with pricing on Big Navi. So yeah, interested to see how everything pans out on that. I'm kind of more curious about the 6700, which, a cut down version, which must be arriving at some point. Wasn't announced then, but I guess that would possibly bring the value. But yeah, I mean, 6700 XT, MSRP for what it's worth, $480. 3060 Ti is $400, so that's quite a big gap. So AMD must really fancy their chances up against the 3070 on that one.
So I guess, that's the main news items for this week, but I think we have something else to discuss and announce this week.
Yeah, so in producing this show, we need more resources. We need more people on board. And who better to be the producer of this show than Audie Surley, who's been kind of like a behind-the-scenes contributor for many months now. And I guess you've got some stuff you want to talk about, John.
Yeah, so let's cut over to the other camera and talk about some of our retro pickups and some new games that were revealed just yesterday. And here we are with our new man on the ground, who's obviously, as we said, he's been helping out on the channel for quite a while in the background, but now more so in an official capacity. I'm joined by Audie Surley, our man on the ground.
How's it going, John?
It's good to have you here, finally, officially. There's a few topics we're going to discuss just to kind of pack in here for a little bit of fun. Maybe this will become a segment on the show because I don't think Rich is too much of a collector, so probably not into this stuff. And the other thing, well, let's just see. So we're going to start, actually, I want to discuss very quickly some of the pickups we got this week because you and I, we collect retro games. We're often picking up new games. Sometimes they take a month or so to arrive, depending on where they're shipped from. So I had a package arrive yesterday with 4 great games. So
my games end up in Richard's mailbox, so I don't even get to see them for months.
That's true, exactly. Especially the CDI games.
Yeah.
So the first one I picked up actually is I got the PC Engine version of Batman at last.
The first Trash Man simulator on the PC Engine.
This is the game where Batman literally takes out the trash. He cleans up the streets. It's an overhead kind of game, but it's surprisingly fun. It's just not very Batman, but the music and the aesthetic is actually fantastic. So it's a fun, weird, quirky game, but I like it.
Yeah, some of the tracks are actually remixes of the NES tracks.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think actually the original stuff in that game, music-wise, is just as good, if not sometimes better.
Sometimes better. I can agree with that.
And I love that NES soundtrack.
Heck yeah. So what about you then? What's your first pick this week? Did you get anything?
So I haven't gotten much the last month just because I've been working pretty hard and haven't had time. I have some on the way though, and I do hope that we can do this segment quite often, every week maybe, and then look at our pickups. But I have to report that this week I am empty-handed.
All right. Well, I'll just quickly run through these other ones before we get to the next news segment. I picked up Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti. Yeah,
you were asking me about this.
Yeah, it came up for a very good price. It comes in one of these little hard cases like the Sunsoft Famicom games or Mega Drive games.
Or Namco games.
Oh, yeah, exactly. All the Namco Famicom games come in these cases.
Pretty much.
So, but basically, it's sort of a chibi-style take on Splatterhouse. It's kind of I always kind of likened it to like Splatterhouse meets Parodius, where, it's a lighthearted take on what was sort of a horror-driven franchise.
Right.
And it has stuff like Dracula doing the moonwalk.
Yep.
And
the Thriller.
It's Thriller. Yeah, exactly. It's fun. It's a cute little game. Has some cool technical features as well. One of those NES games or Famicom games, the parallax scrolling. So definitely cool.
I think it's not the strongest of the Splatterhouse games, though. It's not the best in gameplay terms, but it is a fun collectible. It's like Kid Dracula from Namco.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Which, it's a really cool game. Next one I picked up was the Japanese version of Super Off-Road, which has a utterly bizarre cover art, I think. This one was just dirt cheap, and I really love Super Off-Road. And it's like, okay, I need to pick this up. This is, what is it? It's like Iron Man. Oh, I'm forgetting the name, but you know.
Was that done by Pack-In Video, I saw?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, okay. Almost looked like a Stunt Race FX when you look at that cover.
It does, you're right. It totally does. But no, this
Maybe
is
they
just straight
switched
up
the covers,
off-road.
and it was just, it's the wrong game.
No, it's a truck crushing another truck.
Oh, I see. Okay. It's a pretty cool cover, though.
I love that game, though. And then lastly, I finally got, for a very good price, the Japanese version. Well, I guess it's the only official release of Outrun 2 SP.
Yeah.
Which, so this was the... First of all, it comes with an extra SST band bonus CD, which is cool. But more importantly, this version of the game actually had more work done on it before it released, and it has some extra features, and it's a bit polished up compared to the other Western release of Outrun 2 coast to coast on PS2. So all the frame rate issues are gone, and it's just sort of a polished up, super complete version of that game, and it's really cool. And it's still... this game was designed for the Xbox hardware, but they do some really amazing tricks to simulate things like pixel shaders on the water. Like, it's not actually pixel shader on PS2, but it looks darn close. So maybe I'll look at that in an Outrun video someday.
Yeah, we should definitely do a outro on DF Retro, huh? That game, I remember the very first time I was visiting you a few years ago, I mentioned to you that, hey, I have this game, and I don't know if you were too familiar with it at the time. But I did tell you then that this was actually my last purchase from Lixang, that old web store.
Yeah, that's right.
I bought that at Lixang, I think the same week that, unfortunately, due to a certain company, they had to close down. So
Yep,
I was
that's
pretty
right.
sad, but that was my last purchase there. So I always have a sentimentality for that game, other than being an awesome game.
It was a really late release too, I think, like 2006, 2007 kind of period. But yeah, that's good stuff. So yeah, quick little pickup corner there. And then before we jump back to Richard and Alex, I guess we should briefly touch on some of the cool reveals at a recent show that happened online.
Yeah, so there was a new game Expo this week. And I was thinking while watching this that I've been in the video games industry for 17 and a half years, which gives me existential nightmares thinking about that. But in the last year, I think we've seen more change in regards to how we announce games, how we market, how we release games, and even develop. And it's going to be interesting as we go back to normal, hopefully sooner than later, how these shows are going to fare when physical events are back. So I wonder if shows like New Game Expo will expand and do new things, because, I mean, this is a pretty cool show. It's a cool endeavor, and I hope that it can continue even when bigger shows are back.
So for those that aren't familiar, though, this was a chance for various Japanese publishers and developers to showcase kind of what they're working on. And there was some really cool stuff shown there. Like, some of the highlights for me, I think, it was great to see some real gameplay from R-Type Final 2.
Oh man, yeah. And it's
is a
coming out
wild
soon.
name, but it's coming out really soon. I think they actually pushed it up. So
Yeah, I think so. Last I heard of it, I think it was supposed to be later, but now it's coming sooner. So that's good from Nice America.
We also got a glimpse at the Pocky and Rocky sort of remake being done in the same style as the Ninja Warriors once again. And
by Tango
Wild
Project.
Guns Reloaded. Yeah, exactly. Those guys, amazing. Like, the sprite work, the quality of the artwork in that, just absurdly impressive.
Yeah, we should talk about Kiki Kai Kai a little bit, or Pocky and Rocky Reshined, because I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like Tango Project is kind of like the Christian Whitehead of Japan. You know, they're the kind of people that take the original concepts, make them better, and kind of people always point at the Super Nintendo for their games, of course, because they are originally Super Nintendo games, but I feel like these are almost like Super Saturn games. Where it's just,
I mean, they
very much expanded.
Yeah, they're hugely expanded. The visuals are far more impressive than the Super NES originals. I mean,
sprite sizes,
animation frames. You know, they expanded it to a larger screen area. It's super impressive. So
I kind of wish they got a little bit more recognition for that, because the games, I tend to see them marketed very much like, hey, Super Nintendo games in HD, which isn't really the case. It is much more like a Sonic Mania thing, where it's a reimagining with the foundation in 1632.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
check out Ninja Saviors or Wild Guns Reloaded if you haven't.
So yeah, those are some. I mean, there was also, I guess, there was Blaster Master 03. Azure Striker Gunvolt 3, great stuff from Inti Creates. We saw a friend of the show, Matt Papa, on there streaming.
He was doing a stream. That was pretty cool. And Blastmaster 03 is the finale, they said, of this great new series. So
that's really cool. But what about you? Anything else that really caught your fancy?
Not so much me, but my dear Vivi saw Alchemic Cutie, and I think that was a game she really wanted, so I guess that's a game I will be seeing on my TV quite a lot in the future, and it did look pretty cute, so for those who are into that kind of stuff, that looked pretty fun.
Cool. Okay. Well, I guess that probably wraps it up for this little news segment here. We should probably throw it back to the other guys, but yeah, thanks for joining this little section, and thank you for the upcoming work you're going to be doing with us. So
no problem. So proud to be part of it, and I hope we can be back to do more Japanese news and such on the show weekly.
But we're not the only ones talking about retro games here, of course, because Alex also has joined in on the fun. He is he's going back, and I'm so happy and delighted to see this. So Alex, why don't you tell us about what you picked up?
Yeah, about a week ago I started, I've been looking for a number of months for an older generational PC, and I was looking into the Pentium 3 era, kind of late 90s, 99, late 98, to pick up a PC and start playing games on it. One, because I wanted to see a CRT again in my own possession and just see what that looks like, but also because a lot of these games from back then look and play, honestly, a little bit differently in a better way on hardware from this era. So I went and scoured about, and I found a Pentium 3 PC on the kind of local eBay here. And the best thing is I go to pick this PC up, and the guy already has it running for me as I enter the door. And I'm like, okay, this is really nice of him. But the best part is I start talking to him. And this was, up until last year, PC essentially from 1999 was being used as the family PC for over 20 years in total, which I find amazing that it was even running for this long and had no problems. But they were just using it for word processing and light internet usage. So I essentially grabbed myself a family PC, kind of ready-made thing with like a net card in it, and just integrated Rage, ATI Rage Turbo something graphics, AGP2X thing. That is not exactly what I'm looking for, but I have the components in it for a Pentium 3 machine, which I really liked. So I then scoured eBay again, came across a different motherboard, some other parts that I'm going to be looking into, and kind of reinstalled Windows 98 on it, patched it up, as you can see here. It's working all right now. The next kind of acquisitions for this Pentium 3 machine are going to be a number of GPUs or, graphics accelerators. I've got a Voodoo 3000 on the way, a Matrox MX 440 or 400, I think it is, and a ATI Rage 2C or something like that. Mm-hmm. So a number of, I think 2 AGPs, 1 PCI GPU, and I'm just going to keep looking to expand in terms of hardware because I think this is so cool.
It's addictive, isn't it?
Let's get this right, Alex. It's been a family PC for 20 years. It's still used up until about a month ago. So what OS was it running?
1024 by 768.
No, OS.
20. OS. It was running quite literally Windows 98.
See, so
this entire time.
So Alex, I've been thinking about this. We kind of laughed and you're like, oh man, they've been using this as a family PC for that long. But the fact is, if you actually go and use Windows 98 on an old Pentium 3 PC, it's fast. In fact,
it's mega fast.
It's faster than a lot of modern, lower end PCs you might be using a modern OS on. A lot of those Windows Vista, Windows 7, and even Windows 8 and some 10 PCs, you'd buy them at the store. they don't run as fast as a Pentium 3 with Windows 98. Now, obviously, the workload is very different. Windows 98 is very, very simplistic in comparison, but the user experience is surprisingly fast and smooth. So, like, things like word processing on there will probably be perfectly acceptable. I think the only limitation really is just internets. Like, websites really aren't designed for such old machines anymore, so I feel like the internet isn't great on such a machine, but everything else, like standard stuff you might do, I think it could work.
Yeah, and I think it does work, and it works really well. And one thing I've been trying out with it is just kind of modernizing it to the point where I can easily transfer files on and off of it without relying on like a network connection or floppy
Alex,
disks.
The way to do it is, you can install some USB support into Windows 98 that allows you to use flash drives or like hard drives. So I just keep like a USB connector thing with a USB to SATA adapter strategically located so I can swap in a drive basically as I need. So you just kind of plug it into your normal PC, put files on it, then plug it into the adapter in the Windows 98 PC, and then you can access it immediately. And it's fast, so reasonably fast. So that actually is, I think, the cleanest solution for this.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I think I installed them the other day, but I haven't really been trying it out too much. I did transfer them over, but I haven't really tested it out. But another thing that should be happening after this is that I came in contact with a gentleman here who offered me up a Pentium 133 megahertz PC with already Windows 3.1 on it and everything like that. And I'm very tempted to just grab that because I actually do not remember this time in my life because I was too young. But my family had a Pentium 133 megahertz PC.
And I had a 486 back in the day, so
yeah.
It's a whole different world.
So that was the sort of mega upgrade if you wanted to play Quake properly. I think we were on Pentium 90s at the time, but you needed a Pentium. The 486 just didn't cut it for Quake.
Yeah, 486 was below minimum requirements. You could play it. I did. I mean, I think I talked about this before, but I played it in the smallest window possible at about 5 frames per second. It was terrible. When I eventually got an AMD K6 233, it was life-changing. At least temporarily, until I realized that the K6 was significantly superior, or that the K6 was inferior to Intel's Pentium MMX line at the time when it came to floating point calculations.
Yeah, right.
If I recall, so Quake games, especially with like a Voodoo or any other 3D card installed, they didn't run very well on the K6.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what I can do here. But for right now, this is just my personal project, something I'm doing just for me. But in terms of stuff, I would maybe want to bring it in on the channel, when something like Diablo 2 Remastered comes out. I would like to take a look at it on the old PC, maybe as part of that video where I cover it. Or just in general, over the years, I've been playing older games using things like DG Voodoo on PC. And, what does DG Voodoo output look like, which emulates kind of Voodoo graphics and 3D graphics on modern PCs? What does that look like in comparison to the real 3D effects rendering? Something like that. Just like, I don't know. But at the moment, just for fun.
It's definitely fun. I use mine all the time. It's a great time to mess with these old PCs. And like you say, like you mentioned Diablo 2, that's exactly a great use case for videos. When we cover something and reference an old PC game, it's nice to be able to actually show it running on a PC from that era, because it is different. It's not going to look just the same if you run it on a modern machine, usually. So
yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. We're going to talk for a little while about the projects we've been doing recently. So I guess we'll kick off by talking about Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, I guess, which was a bit contentious.
Yeah, so this is just a chance to kind of run down, we've put the video out, and one of the things that really sticks out to me when you read stuff on this is like, I feel like I really try to help people understand what's going on, but I'm not sure that everybody quite gets it, because one, there's still this mistake that it's like somehow thought to be a native next-gen game when it's not. And then two, I feel like the point about Xbox One X having those issues, some folks might have missed. So the idea is that, what we showed was that in this one section of the track, the Series X just dropped frames, and it was, bizarre. So it was kind of a fun exercise to explore as to what was going on, and we could do that because the support went back to the last gen consoles, and you could play it on Xbox One X, and that generally was above PS4 Pro, like throughout the race by about 10 frames per second, and they kind of scaled exactly as you would expect until you get to that exact section, in which case the frame rate drops to like 30 something just there. So what we're seeing basically is that the Xbox Series X, the additional power afforded to backwards compatibility is not enough to overcome a dip that serious. So the dip on One X is so significant that the BC function on the system, I guess, whatever is available to it, was not enough to get it all the way up to 60 basically.
Yeah.
So I think that's, that's basically the issue. Is like there's something up with the game in that specific track area, and it's visible on Xbox One X, but it only became visible once the frame rate was unlocked. So that's, it's not about what the new machines are doing so much. It's just the whole point of the video there was to help people understand why it was slowing down, and also look at if you trace it back to the older machines. So I see why it can be complicated to think about it that way, but it is worth considering.
Yeah, I think Back Compat Plus doesn't tap into the full potential of the machine by any stretch of the imagination. It's just an accelerant almost, and the results vary. I think from my perspective, the thing that's sort of baffling to me is that when you consider Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, the original PC version, which seems to be the basis for Remastered, that was a really well-optimized game. It was phenomenally good, as was
I think so.
Burnout Paradise.
There's some reports of stuttering on the old PC version, but I'm not sure what they're talking about, because I was playing that back in like 2011, no problem at 60 FPS. I think I even mentioned I was using 4X SG SSAA at the time.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Getting 60 FPS, it looks so smooth and so clean, and this was on like a GTX 260 or something.
Yeah.
So it seems like the game itself isn't as optimized as it could be. I actually think it should have been 60 FPS on like the base consoles from last gen. Really,
it really should.
Absolutely.
But beyond that, I mean, when we're talking about all this backwards compatibility stuff, it's always interesting to consider. The Xbox One X is closer to the Series X in terms of raw capabilities than PS4 Pro is to the PS5. You know what I mean? So like, I feel like due to the differential there, you could have a PS4 Pro game drop under 30, and as long as it's not too far below, you might still have enough grunt on the PS5 to push it all the way up to 60, basically solve that problem. Whereas because the One X is so much, it's basically half of what the Series X is. I think, it doesn't, you don't see it scale. The scale it's a different jump, basically.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's other things that might, I've been thinking about this quite a lot. I mean, if you think about the PlayStation 5, it has 36 compute units, just like the PS4 Pro. You get this huge acceleration via a faster GPU clock. You've got a fundamentally awesome jump in CPU power.
Oh, yeah.
Which is common between Xbox and PlayStation. But I'm just wondering whether those architectural similarities between the PS4 Pro and the PS5 might be paying off for them a little bit more, because we are seeing games that are routinely delivering over 2 times the frame rate. So, the Sony first-party stuff we've been looking at recently, Days Gone and God of War, they could drop beneath 30, but they were pretty much flawless on PlayStation 5. And I guess The Last Guardian was another one when you used the disc version. Again, that was just a huge improvement on the PlayStation 5 compared to the PS4 Pro, which I suspect combination of CPU and GPU there.
That's an interesting one too, because The Last Guardian, especially off the disc, I mean, on PS4 Pro in the high-res mode, it would often drop to like 20 FPS. It was really not smooth at all. The PS5 just kind of powers right through it and just runs it at a flat 60 in that mode, which is crazy. So
what is the exact bandwidth?
The scaling is really good between them.
What is the exact GPU video memory bandwidth on PS4 Pro again?
It's 400 it's shared, obviously.
It's
448 gigabytes per second versus 218 on the Pro. So again, that's another gigantic leap.
I'm wondering if what we're seeing is also some PS4 Pro games where at the way they kind of designed them for their resolution target and frame rate cap, whether or not they were actually, when you unlocked the frame rate there, actually bandwidth constrained in those moments is what I'm wondering too. Which is maybe another different area of scaling we'd see in comparison to Xbox One X to Xbox Series X, because there's a larger multiplier, like you just said, Rich, there between PS4 Pro and PS5 in terms of memory bandwidth. And there's like new color compression, all these other things that have been happening in the years between PS4 Pro and PS5 that we don't see on the Xbox One X to Series X jump so much so. So that would be interesting if that's the truth, but who knows?
Sort of talking about other content that's in the works that may or may not be published by the time you watch this. Well, I've been working on RTX 3080 laptops, something to look forward to there. It's really quite fascinating to see a new generational leap in the mobile space, but also the issues that there are in basically scaling down high-power desktop parts into necessarily lower power notebook parts. And the question of whether an RTX 3080 remains an RTX 3080 in the mobile space when it's a very different performance profile. But that's something we can talk about at a later date. I think more interesting in terms of production is probably the project you're working on now, John.
Yeah, so I'm finishing up a video on Dinosaur Planet and Star Fox Adventures, which should be up by the time this is out, depending on how things go. But it's nearing completion right now. This is basically that N64 game that leaked that Rare had been working on that became Star Fox Adventures, and I thought it would be a fun thing to look at for this video, but it turned out to be more challenging than expected because it's very, very unstable. After about the hour and a half mark, like the game just kind of breaks. You try to enter this cave and it crashes. So it basically turned into this game of like reading what I could, trying to find ways to break through and see areas that you shouldn't otherwise get to. Like there's this one section where to get into this desert area, you just have to stand around these trees and whack these things off the trees. I don't know why, and they don't always appear either. But when you do it, eventually you hear a little chime noise, and then you walk up to the statue that's blocking the way, and she puts the item in there that you didn't have, by the way, and then you have access to the desert. So you can explore this whole massive, beautiful area that wasn't really accessible. But then eventually you find a temple and there's just a guard there, and as soon as you touch him, the game just hard crashes again.
Crazy.
So basically, it just crashes constantly. You can't play that far into it now. But I have been following a lot of the community work, and I'm not going to be going into too much of that stuff for this video. It's more about comparing and discussing the similarities, differences, changes. But there are people that are like super hard at work and kind of piecing this thing together. So I do have some hope that at some point we'll see a version that's like polished up and actually feasible to play through instead of just like kind of broken. So
how does
it's been? But on top of that, one of the craziest things is I realized I had interview footage about this that I filmed back in 2017, I think, when I did the Donkey Kong Country retrospective with the gentleman at Playtonic, and Kev Bayless was in that video, and I had actually recorded a lot of extra interview stuff about N64 and GameCube era, and we talked about this. I had almost forgotten, so I reached out to him again just to say, hey, I found this old footage. I'm going to use it again. Is that okay? And he's, yeah, of course. So no problem there. So it's basically like some lost interview footage I had where he kind of discusses some of the situation around changing it and their trip to Japan to discuss things with Nintendo and how they were going to change up the game and just stuff like that. So it's winding up to be a pretty interesting project that I hope people enjoy.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. One thing which isn't on the docket, looking at the list here, but I'd quite like to talk about it because it is newsworthy. Alex, you're working on a new take on Horizon Zero Dawn on PC, yeah, which I do think is actually quite worthy of discussion because Jim Ryan came out last week to say, hey, we're actually going to be doing a big bunch of stuff on PC. And Days Gone, I think, is the first title that they're going to be rolling out. But obviously we do have Horizon Zero Dawn, which has been problematic. I also think that I think a lot of people are looking at the Back Compat Plus titles on Sony first party and saying, hey, why aren't they doing Horizon? Why isn't Horizon running at 60 frames per second?
Yeah.
And I think possibly some of the difficulties that have been faced on that port might be a reason why we haven't seen that PS5 patch. I don't know what you think, Alex.
Yeah, that's kind of my video will come out at some point, and people will see what I have to say. But I think in general, Horizon was just a game designed around 30 FPS, and as soon as they put it over 30 FPS and allowed it to be unlocked, it showed a lot of problems that maybe the engine had, that like implicit assumptions it made that started not working so well at higher frame rates and things like that. So maybe the reason why they can't just put out a BC patch to unlock Horizon Zero Dawn for PlayStation 5 play is because it would actually just not work very well at all, like we've seen on PC. So that's one thing I think that we can safely assume based upon the results we've seen over time. That video will come out, and I do think Horizon Zero Dawn's quite a bit better than launch. It still has some oddness in it, but I think that's just all legacy baggage at this point that would just maybe be a lot of headaches and work to get working in a way that we usually expect.
Yeah, I think also when you look at something like Days Gone, has an Unreal Engine 4 foundation. It looks like unlocking the frame rate does result in instant success. Same with Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
So those titles coming to PC, I'm really looking forward to seeing what can be done with them, given the vast increase in potential performance that's on offer there. Yeah. As well as different display formats, of course.
Yeah, ultra wide would look great. And something like Ghost of Tsushima, in terms of games that I would be personally interested, they brought over a little bit of port begging, would be Dreams probably, because I feel like that game is a creatively oriented game, and those kind of games have a great success on PC over a long period of time. Whereas of now, maybe the audience is smaller and it's not growing as much as they would like. Putting a creative game always on PC just lets it flourish, and usually a game like that does really well. You know, I think that's the next step.
Definitely. Let's move on now to some Q&A from our Patreon supporters. This is really important. I'm really looking forward to answering some of these questions. Obviously, Patreon supporters, join us on the Discord. Put any questions you have to us there. Really interested in hearing what you think. All feedback welcome. And the only stupid question is the one not asked.
Thank you.
As they say. But we've got a question here, a really straightforward one from Cliptacular. And I'm quite interested in this one. The favourite game to demo HDR to people who don't know what HDR is. And man, we're spoiled for choice here, I think. What do you reckon, John?
So I think the two that I still go to that just like floor everyone. First, I throw on Gears 5 and I load up the introduction sequence in the first mission, because that's just, I feel like when you actually see that running, it's just kind of like it's a true wow moment, and it's really the game looks dramatically better with HDR enabled than it does without, in a way that's usually not so significant. Like, you don't usually feel like that's split so much, but I really feel like when you turn off HDR, it just sucks so much out of the game's visuals, which, you know, they're still impressive, but it's really good in HDR. But then the other one is an old favorite of mine, is I still think Gran Turismo Sport. I've mentioned this many times, but there's something about the way that they handle the lighting in HDR there, like the contrast of like the high intensity beams on the car headlights versus the, you know, like the glow of the sky and the various other electronic elements around the scene, combined with the natural lighting in the world. Somehow together, it just has this super intense, vibrant look that feels like somehow it makes it look almost more photorealistic somehow, in a way where it just, I don't know, it really impresses every time I look at it. So I feel like those two games, you know, there's plenty of others, but to me, those are like the best demonstration material.
Right. I'd like to put in Ori and the Will of the Wisps on Series X.
Oh, that's another one, yes. Especially running in 4K HDR at 120 hertz.
At 120 hertz. That's the game changer. You've got the complete package. You've got the resolution. You've got the HDR. And you've got the smoothest, locked 120 hertz presentation I've seen on a next-gen console. And it's just awesome. I just can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah. It's you're right. That would definitely be the third one for me as well. It's just there's that section early on where you grab the torch, and just like the intensity of the fire contrasted against the dark and stormy background, it's unbelievable. It really feels like it just leaps off the screen. So those games you've got to see in HDR.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Let's have a look at the second question, which is, if I can find the right thing on the Google Doc here, what are the team's thoughts as far as Apple possibly making more inroads into gaming as the M series chips mature? I'd quite like to take this one. I think fundamentally the technology is looking really awesome. And I think I mentioned earlier about the RTX 3080, this whole idea of bringing lower power versions of higher power parts. Apple are kind of going around it the other way. They've got their lower performing parts for the mobile phones, state of the art in their class, and then they're kind of pumping more power, expanding cores and GPU cores, bringing it into the mobile space. And we're seeing some really good results there. I guess my question really is how much Mac OS as a format can mature. I guess there is scalability because you can run the same code across iOS and Mac OS. I don't know. It's just developer buy-in really, and obviously getting the sheer amount of devices out there and sort of evangelizing that they're gaming capable.
Yeah.
I think Apple's done a lot of good work here. The Metal API, for example, is designed to get more performance out of what is a fundamentally mobile architecture, mobile GPUs. Some good inroads being there. Apple Arcade seems to be going down really well. But, it seems to be sort of a different type of game on Mac OS. We don't seem to be seeing much of the AAA juggernauts there. And maybe that's a good fit for the hardware. I don't know. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think the hardware is really cool. It's just like a different design than what we've seen because it has a different assumptions. It doesn't have legacy and all of these things. It's like a fresh start. So it's very interesting in that aspect. In terms of the kind of inroads into gaming of bringing maybe AAA games into the Mac OS kind of platform, I actually think even though Metal's cool, I think it's a little bit of a hurdle because there's like no cross-platform Vulkan support in a simple way. And portability is a big deal for large AAA games. And there has to be less of a hurdle there, I think, and maybe also a willingness of audience. I actually don't know anything about the OS, OS X audience or the Mac OS audience these days that is into gaming. I just don't know. Those are like untouched waters by me. I can't actually purport an opinion about that.
I mean, that question came from Joe Esposito, which I forgot to mention. Sorry about that. But yeah, I'm kind of curious about this because obviously mobile gaming is huge on iOS. The hardware is state-of-the-art, first class. Android devices kind of struggle to catch up to Apple hardware that's like 1 or 2 generations old. So there's a huge opportunity there. It's just a case, from my perspective, of whether we're going to see different types of games, how Apple Arcade is going to evolve, that kind of thing. I mean, you're an iOS user, right, John?
Yeah, I mean, I am, but just, obviously just for the phone. And I'm not a big mobile gamer. I play occasionally, but the fact is, it's like those games drain your battery pretty hard. And I don't really like to have the device that I rely on for communication to run dry because I was playing around with some game on there. So I don't find it that appealing personally. But it is interesting that with this move into like sort of the more desktop OS space that they're doing here now, this like synergy between them, there is some more potential. Like I did catch the new Mistwalker game. Looks interesting. Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, he's launching a new game on Apple Arcade, and that actually looks pretty interesting and nice. And I was kind of like, oh, that's a phone game, but you can play that on something that's not just a phone maybe, and it becomes more interesting there as well. So I don't know. It seems like it could flourish into its own separate thing that might be pretty appealing to its audience, but I don't think it's going to necessarily come in and like replace anything else. It's just hopefully kind of continue to evolve as its own thing.
I actually really want a new Mac. I've got an old 2014, 2015 Mac, and these new models look really enticing, but I suspect the second gen ones would be the ones to look out for. Third question from Docs here. Really interesting one. Current and future rendering techniques that we should be keeping an eye on. I want to go first on this one. I just think we're going to be seeing so much from AI, from NVIDIA and from others. Remember, Microsoft are still looking into their own AI upscaling solution for Xbox Series consoles. If we look at what DLSS has achieved in such a short period of time and just how flexible the tensor cores are, you can be damn sure that NVIDIA isn't stopping just on AI upscaling. I'm just hugely excited.
That's what I was going to say, is I actually think there's a lot of potential for AI usage in other areas of gaming that we've not really seen explored before. And I suspect there's a lot of people doing a lot of research and development right now on potential uses for this stuff. And it's the kind of thing that we won't necessarily see right now, right away, or in the next year or so even, but it's something to keep an eye on, because I think there's a lot of potential use for this technologies.
Definitely. Alex?
You guys already touched on AI, so I will kind of avoid that for a little bit. But looking at the MetaHumans demo that the guys and people at Epic just brought out, this technology is a really good one for game development, because it's essentially trying to lower the burden of producing high quality character content, of character models, character animations. It's essentially a great platform for reusing a bunch of scan data and a bunch of rigging data, and allowing these things still to have a high quality. I think this is less geared towards people just consuming games, but I like the idea of this kind of proceduralized shared data environment that something like MetaHumans represents, because it'll mean games being developed in the future where the content pipeline is not the biggest sunk cost, which is huge for modern AAA games.
Yeah. See, this is interesting, Alex. I think this is actually the kind of thing that could really help a lot of those open world RPG games as well. Like developers that need to create, like you look at Bethesda, it's like we have to create all these NPCs. They all need to speak to the player. Doing that at a high fidelity is extremely expensive in the old way. Employing technology like this could really allow them to create a workflow that's actually more feasible, less expensive, and would provide a significant boost in overall quality.
I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of it over time. I mean, just to mention it really quickly, but we didn't maybe mention it in the article we had on it, but this tech has already been out there for a couple of years. It was originally developed by 3Lateral, and they demoed it on Unreal Engine years ago, and then it kind of disappeared for a while. They demoed it at that time to integrate it into what was then the CryEngine or Lumberyard for Star Citizen. So Star Citizen has it now. It's just really interesting to see. I wonder what the next step is, because it still requires the initial step of having these humans being scanned in and then being touched up to be perfect enough to be implemented in the MetaHumans verse of shareable data.
I think final word from me on this one, current and future rendering techniques. Well, current techniques, obviously, and I'm surprised you didn't bring it up, Alex, ray tracing.
Yeah.
There are ways to be traced, obviously. And if we look at the recent announcement from 4A Games on the revised Metro Exodus, they're promising not a native 4K, but a 4K fully ray traced experience for the next generation consoles, current generation consoles, if you will. And again, that's just hugely exciting stuff, and I really can't wait to see what's happening there. But it does signal that talented developers are getting to grips with the ray tracing hardware within the AMD SoCs and the new consoles, and are able to produce, fingers crossed, really stunning effects while not sacrificing 60 frames per second, which I think has been the standout win of the generation so far. So yeah, that's another thing I think we definitely need to keep an eye on.
One other thing I really want to toss in there real quick is I really want to see more work done with fluid simulation.
Right.
Whether it's like particles, water. There's all these ideas and concepts where I feel like this is one area where we're still really limited in terms of what games are doing. Things like smoke, for instance, it's still done typically with like billboard clouds and things like that. But having like real simulation of that, in terms of interacting with the physics engine and everything, or like water that behaves more realistically, this stuff is pretty expensive, I think, but it's something that I've been wanting to see used in more games for many years now.
Okay, next question from Patito Loco. Probably mispronounced that, and I do apologize. Some of the craziest leaks DF heard over the years. Nothing is ever, for me, going to beat the PlayStation 3 Slim making its debut in a Philippines marketplace a month before I saw it in Gamescom. That was my craziest leak. That was just remarkable. These kind of really grainy photos emerged, and nobody could believe it, but it kind of was the PS3 Slim. I don't know what you guys have got to say about crazy leaks. John?
Oh man, leaks. That's a tough one. I mean, I guess, I wasn't thinking so much leaks, but the thing that always comes out to me is I remember the old the GPU and the power brick stories around the launch of Xbox One. Is coming up.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of crazy leaks, there have been a lot of crazy leaks about the PlayStation 5, sorry, which just turned out to be complete nonsense in a similar vein to the dual layer ES RAM and the second GPU in the power brick for Xbox One. I do have something to say about this. Maybe I'll do a more fully featured video about it. But look, when a platform holder makes a technical disclosure in the way that Mark Cerny did with the road to PS5, they're doing it primarily because the information is with developers and they expect it to leak. So, this idea that they're holding back some massive game-changing features, whether it's RDNA 3, 4, or 5, it's simply extremely unlikely, because if developers know about it, it's likely to leak. Therefore, they take mitigating steps, which is public disclosure. And that's the way it works, and that's how Microsoft did it. Now, obviously, there was more disclosure from Microsoft than there was from PlayStation, and a kind of no comment approach from PlayStation when we asked them for stuff like, well, hold on a minute, there are these DX12 Ultimate features you've not talked about. I think when we get no comment, we should kind of assume that they just don't want to talk about it, and we can draw our own conclusions from that. But there's, whenever there's a new console launch, and we're kind of possibly going to see it again with the next Switch, everybody hopes and wants the best, and I can understand that. And then we get, insiders coming forward with stuff that just isn't, doesn't make sense. I guess Nintendo don't do technical disclosures, which sets them apart. But fundamentally, please just listen to what the actual people are saying. The people working on the projects are saying about their projects, and bear in mind that if there is stuff missing, it's going to leak anyway, but not in the way that we saw with some of the PlayStation and indeed Xbox stuff. So that's kind of all I've got to say about crazy leaks on next-gen consoles. Okay, next question comes again from Joe Esposito, which is, does a competitor come from within the console group, or can someone else succeed where Stadia is flailing? I assume this is about streaming, which is your favourite topic, John. But, well, look, all I'm going to say again is Microsoft are building a really impressive sounding streaming platform. The Scala SoC within Xbox Series X can be virtualized to act as 4 Xbox One S consoles. I think that's quite a remarkable technological achievement. I think streaming is going to be appealing to a particular type of audience, but probably not our audience. And I think it could be quite transformative in markets where it's impossible to launch a console or very difficult to launch a console, increases accessibility because virtually everyone across the world, all of those territories have access to smartphones. So that makes a lot of sense. I think Microsoft are well positioned for that. I think Sony agrees because they've signed a deal with Microsoft for handling PlayStation streaming going forward. But we're never going to fully overcome the latency issues and the image quality issues. John?
I've given my take on this kind of stuff before, and it's just... I think you're right that Microsoft is probably very well suited to make this work. I would be okay with streaming as sort of a support style, basically an additional feature. You know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, you're already in this ecosystem, but you can also stream the games to a mobile device. That's kind of my issue with Stadia, is that it's focused specifically and only on streaming. And streaming is not a way that I would ever want to seriously play a game. But in a pinch, it could be useful. Though, looking at my own habits, the only time where I'm like, okay, well, I really need access to this is usually... Well, it used to be when I was on a plane, which I haven't done in a long time, and the internet there wouldn't have been fast enough to handle streaming, so you'd want something local anyway. But I could see potential there. And I really think that that's going to be the key, is launching a streaming platform alongside a platform that already exists, which is why, it could work for Microsoft, Sony, and the like. But Stadia... I guess a kind of disruptive competitor in this, and I think Stadia just gave up on it completely now, would be something that could make streaming interesting to the audience, maybe where it's not the target audience immediately, would be if there was some sort of streaming only killer app equivalent where the technological basis for this can only occur because of streaming tech. Like a massive server of people all doing one thing together, where local clients could never handle that. Too much latency, too much whatever. But a data server sending out images of this happening, that's an idea that I thought could have happened with Stadia, but since they gave up entirely on the developing of their own titles, I don't see this as something happening. That's interesting, Alex. It has occurred to me. Maybe the issue is so much that a lot of these platforms are focusing on, well, here's the games you can play anywhere else, and we're also going to make it playable on streaming. But what about a service, like you look at stuff like Minecraft or Roblox or some kind of platform for a game. What if you had a game-style platform like a Roblox kind of thing, but it was all based on streaming? So it's not so much about, playing other games there. It's about that experience using streaming. They could build something that's completely different, taking full advantage of the potential of like having a giant data center at your disposal. That actually could be really interesting, I think.
I don't see it as anything anytime soon will happen.
Yeah. There was a lot of features for Stadia that were announced, like, you could share a link and people could join your game. That's kind of really sort of forward-thinking stuff, but it never kind of happened. Some of the stuff did, like the split screen stuff, which was basically taking other people's stream and integrating it into your own. But I don't consider those game-changing features. No. Yeah, and speaking of game-changing, a game-changing question here from Bob Dutch, which I suspect is a pseudonym for our producer. Which Bubsy game is Rich's favourite? There are no favourites because they're all awful. The first one, this is the thing. The first one was hyped so heavily. I was there. I was working on a Mega Drive mag at the time. It was hyped so heavily. It was going to be the new Sonic. It was going to be, absolutely massive. Bubsy was everywhere. The game came in and it was, adequate. Sort of Chester Cheetah, too cool to fall, cool spot level. Not the sort of Sonic or Super Mario killer. And I suspect I'm taking this question way too seriously, and Audie is chuckling away to himself as he edits this. But
hey, the first Bubsy is not a bad game, I think. It's very okay. It's a solid platformer. It's just that what came after it it's pretty bad.
But
that's really the problem.
Would you play Bubsy or Chester Cheetah, too cool to fall?
I would play Bubsy.
Cool spot.
That's tough.
It's no Rocket Knight or Sparkster, really, is it?
No.
Let's be honest. That's kind of what we were hoping back in the day. Okay, well, I think that's it. I think that's our first show. I think we've gone through the entire gamut here. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, Patreon supporters, any questions you have, send them our way via Discord. If you're not on the Discord and you are a Patreon supporter, please do get involved. It's awesome on there. And just generally, if you want to support Digital Foundry, please do consider our Patreon. It makes so much possible. It gives us the time to do some of the crazier projects that we'd like to investigate but couldn't really otherwise. And of course, just the concept of, hey, we're doing a pretty good job here, we like to think, and supporting us a little. Pretty awesome stuff. But I guess that's all from us. So thank you, John, first of all, for this.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Happy to be here.
And Alex, I know you've had some technical difficulties. Hope everything has been sorted out.
I think this will look good at the end. But also thanks to Audie for who's going to be editing this.
Okay, well, that's it. As usual, if you're watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe, share, ring the notification bell. But that's all from us. Thanks for watching. Finally, a headset that can be as expressive as you. G733 is wireless and designed for comfort, and it's outfitted with all the surround sound, voice filters and advanced lighting you need to look, sound and play with more style than ever. Lightspeed Wireless technology lets you game wirelessly without compromises in latency, connectivity or battery. Play in complete freedom with over 20 hours of battery life and a range of up to 15 meters.